Are you in LA, right?
I'm back in LA now. Yes, I just arrived last night, and
So you missed out the rain and all that, the Hurricane
I
Hillary. Did
did.
that
I
affect you?
completely missed it. Everything is fine. I didn't have to go up
That's
there.
good.
All right. So,
That's good.
yeah.
So, Randall, let's talk about, your career. I saw Flight of the Navigator. I would say probably early 90s. There used to be this I don't know how it was in US and Canada. There used to be this on Sunday evenings there at 7 p.m. there used to be a Wonderful World of Disney
Oh
where
yes,
they would showcase right, they will showcase the movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or even the 90s. And that's when I saw Flight of the Navigator. And I totally loved it because, and I saw that before E.T., even though it came after E.T. And I saw it again recently, still very timeless, totally loved it. And the messaging behind that and the visuals, even, at the time were fantastic. So just from that context wise, I'm just sort of letting you know that where I'm coming from in terms of your work and what you have done. So really wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you for the comment. I remember very vividly Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color because that's where I learned about movie making. When I was a kid, that was the only way that you could learn about anything behind the scenes. Disney, there was no internet, there was no director's commentary on DVDs. There was nothing. So the only way a kid could learn about what was going on and how you make movies was from watching that show.
Yeah. And talking about that, let's talk about your career. You talked about, learning about your films through watching Wonderful World of Disney, and I'm sure there are other sources. How did the interest start? What was the catalyst in getting into films and your journey throughout?
Well, I was always interested in art, and my grandfather sent me to art school, and that's where I learned this contour drawing thing, which I've just released in my book, Drawing Directors. But I really got interested in movie making from watching The Ten Commandments, where Cecil B. DeMille came out on stage in front of the curtain to talk about the movie he was about to show that he had made, and I figured out, oh, there's a guy who makes movies, and otherwise I would not have known. I thought they just showed up. So that's where I first learned that there was such thing as a director, Cecil B. DeMille.
Right. And then after piquing that interest getting discovered, obviously, like you said, at the time, there was no school. It was just 8 millimeters cameras. What kind of kept you going up until the first short film or feature film that you made, or even like a home video for just to get your hands on stuff?
Yeah, the Disney show was the thing that got me going because I saw how animated cartoons were made, and I tried to do one myself. I saw that you had this clear plastic, and you inked the drawing on one side and painted on the other, and I did that by getting these things from the stationery store that you put your reports in. I bought a whole bunch of those, and I followed all the directions that I saw on this one. And I made a little animated film that was very crude, but it was very ambitious. And when my family drove from Philadelphia to Los Angeles in 1958, I took that film along with me, a little yellow box, 8 millimeter box, to show to Walt Disney. And I couldn't get through the gate, so I gave up on cartoons and decided to make live action films.
Interesting. And then what got you into the gate, for the lack of a better word, to make the films that you have made? Like, what was that transition and path like?
Well, when I returned to Philadelphia and started making 8 millimeter films with my friends, very similar to the Fablemans, the way Steven Spielberg did it. We got all his friends together and showed it, and made a movie and showed it to his friends. That's what I did. And then I got into USC, and came out to LA and started studying filmmaking. And then when I started making a bunch of student films and helping all my friends make them, John Milius and George Lucas and Caleb Deschanel were all in my class. We were helping each other with their films. And then I made my master's thesis film, which was called Peach, which is about my grandmother in a nursing home. And that movie is the one that's seen by people in the industry, and I was immediately asked to start directing TV shows from that film. So my master's thesis got me launched.
What was the film about? Your more than what you just said, grandmother in the nursing home. What was the premise?
It was based on a visit that my family and I had on a Christmas day to the nursing home to see my grandmother, who was in bad shape. She was sort of blind and senile and all that. And we were trying to give her presents and try and make small talk and everything. And then when it was time to leave, I stayed behind a little bit and tried to dig deeper and try to trigger her memories about the past. And then I left. And I made a movie about that. And at the very end of the movie, Bruce Davison played my part. At the end of the movie, there's a big close-up of her, and she smiles. So you get the sense that that all went through, and she experienced that. And that film was picked up by all kinds of nursing homes and aging centers to show sensitivity training for nurses. So it was a 16 millimeter film, and this company, Phoenix Films, distributed it, and in 10 years it made $1 million.
Oh wow.
Student film, yes.
Oh wow. Oh wow. I mean, at the time that was huge, even now, but at the time,
yes. I mean, the idea that a student film would make money, I mean, it's crazy.
Is that available to see anywhere?
It's on Amazon. Peege, P-E-E-G-E.
Sorry, P.
P-E-E-G-E on Amazon. And yeah, I was able to get, because of the script, I was able to get names to be in it. Barbara Rush, who starred opposite Paul Newman, and Marlon Brando was playing the mother, and Jeanette Nolan, who played opposite Orson Welles, and Macbeth played the grandmother, and Bruce Davis. Yeah, I was really lucky because I had a casting director friend who called and sent the script around, and they all loved it. So it all came together in a nice way.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check this out because it is something that I have a very strong viewpoint about nursing homes and stuff. So I'm completely fascinated with this already, and I would love to watch it and check it out. And you mentioned that you were in school with Lucas, and 70s was one of that era that literally was the beginning of a change in filmmaking world. Not to disrespect anything from the 60s, Stanley Kubrick and everybody else, David Lean, that has done some amazing stuff. But 70s was like a new generation, and Coppola, Spielberg, De Palma, Lucas, yourself. I mean, there's so many people like Robert Redford, and it just started this trend with American Graffiti, Jaws, Grease, Aliens with Ridley Scott, and then James Cameron in the 80s. How, being part of that era and seeing things progressing compared to where you are right now, what differences do you see, if any, or similarities in if the new era is starting right now? It already has started 10 years ago.
Well, now there's so many outlets. The streamers make it so there needs so much content that I think that we're going through another big transition. That transition you're referring to started with Easy Rider in the late 60s, early 70s. And that's when the studios realized that there was an audience out there of young people. Because up until then, it was more like general audiences and families and stuff like that. And Doris Day and Rock Hudson and big epic things. But then they realized, oh, there's young people out there who watch movies. And I think that triggered a whole change in the way movies were made. And now the digital revolution changed it too in the 2000s. Suddenly it was cheaper and easier to make films. And now it's even cheaper with new iPhone movies. And there's so many film guys who want to be film directors now. When we went to school, there was just a handful of us. And now every film school has many guys trying to be directors, but also there's many more outlets. So it's been an explosion.
Do you feel? I mean, look, the school. Like I went to school for I did my thing in IT, and I went back to school for film. Just I was supposed to do a certificate, and I only took like 4 or 5 courses, and that was it, because it was just turning out to be ridiculously expensive buying film and all that. And do you sometimes I feel, and you tell me what you think, is it too much focus now in the school side of things that you are probably not going to experiment as you probably did in your generation growing up, where, not that I'm just not discounting school. I'm just saying the idea of being restricted by certain rules where you can't break them. Does that take away from the art and media? Do you see that now in your experience from an
I,
outsider?
I haven't been down to the schools lately. I mean, I do speak at schools, but I don't know what's going on there. I just tell them about
Right.
my experiences. But I think that the rule breakers are the ones who become successful. George Lucas broke every rule. John Milius, same thing. I was more traditional, but I think if you have a strong idea and you're brave enough to try it, that's what breaks out the pack. And all these kids who are now experimenting with new technology and AI and virtual reality and all that, they will come up with a new way of telling stories that we don't know about. And that's
Mm.
in the next revolution.
Yeah, for sure. I'll come back to Flight of the Navigator and a bunch of other stuff that I want to talk to you about, but jumping directly into your book,
Yes.
tell me about your book. What's the title, leave it for our audience, and what inspired you to do a book like this?
Well, as I mentioned, I always used to sketch, and when a lot of times my parents would take me to church, and I'd be a little bored, so I'd start sketching the choir, but I couldn't really go up and down, looking up and down like that. So I used the technique I learned in art school called blind contour drawing, where you put your eye and your pen together and you move them together. So you're
Yeah.
drawing something without looking down. And so I started doing a lot of that. And then when I would go to Q&As or go to parties and stuff, I would often be looking at people I admired, like other directors that I admired. I was lucky enough to be around a lot of them, going to school and working as an extra in movies. So I had access to these people in real life. So I started drawing them, and I ended up having like 200 of them. And so I decided to make a book out of it. And uh, it's got like, on one page it has like the drawing, and on the other side it has like here's one, Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
This one, I was on the set of Beach Blanket Bingo because I would, when I was a student, I would get a bus route and find out where movies were shooting, and I'd go there and I'd observe how they made movies. And I snuck onto the set of Beach Blanket Bingo just to watch. And there was Buster Keaton sitting in a corner, and nobody seemed to know who he was. And I went, oh my God, we just watched his silent films in school. So I went over and I said, Mr. Keaton, and he was real friendly. He was happy somebody knew who he was. And he was one of the biggest directors in history. I mean, the movie The General, Orson Welles says it's the best movie ever made. It's a gigantic Civil War movie, I believe, and there's a scene in it where a big train goes off of a trestle and explodes and falls down. Thousands of extras. I mean, he was like the David Lean of the silent era, and here he was sitting doing a little cameo in Beach Blanket Bingo. So there's things like that. And I worked as an extra on different movies with Mike Nichols and George Roy Hill, and then through USC I met Robert Wise and George Cooper. So I was around all these. I just started drawing and writing about them. So that's the book.
And I went through your book, and there are just so many reputable names that you have sort of you talk about in the book: Cameron Crowe, Spielberg, Coppola, James Cameron, George Clooney, John Carpenter. I mean, I can go on. Kenneth Branagh, Danny Boyle. And all of them, you have these stories with all of them. I mean, yeah, they're page long, but still to be able to remember so much. Were you keeping like some sort of a journal diary over the years,
Oh,
or is it
I just, when you really respect somebody and you watch their movies and you analyze them and figure out what did they do that I'd like to copy, or what
yeah,
advice that they give people, because I have a lot of advice in the book from those people.
Right.
It's always good to recycle advice because you have to be reminded of it every time you start a new project. And you want to, get the best advice from the top guys. And so it stuck in my mind. I didn't keep any notes.
Okay. What were the top three advices that you received that went into the book?
Well, I think more importantly than the book is my advice that I got from my mentor and teacher, Nina Foch, who was an actress in the Ten Commandments, Spartacus, American Paris. And I studied with her at USC with George Lucas. And she worked with Kubrick and Robert Wise and Vincent Minnelli, all these directors. And she took everything she learned from them and combined it with studying Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler and into her own way of teaching. And it was just amazing. And it took me about 10 years to convince her to let us film her class. And we did. And it's called the Nina Foch Course for Filmmakers and Actors. And that's also on Amazon. And it was a labor of love. And everything I ever learned about directing, every piece of advice that I got, it came from her. And so I'd say that's even more important for anybody who's interested in learning about directing and acting.
What is it called? That's on Amazon, the title?
The Nina Foch Course for Filmmakers and Actors. And she taught for 40 years at USC and at AFI. And many, many directors studied with her. And we even have a website, Nina Foch project.com, where all the directors and actors who worked with her talk about what they learned, including, she also worked with singers, Julie Andrews and Barry Manilow and all these people, because she talked about how you have to act the song. You don't just sing it. You have to break the lyrics down, just like you do for an actor when you're making a movie. And I used to hire her to break down my scripts when I would work, and she would figure out the action for every line, what the actor is thinking. And if you spend the time to do that on your script, break down the action beside each one, when you're on the set and an actor comes up and says, I don't get this, you can give them the action to seduce or to start a party. And you just look at the script and they say, why didn't you do it like as if you're trying to start this party, And it works really well.
Yeah. Was there a specific advice in that you sought from her that's in that course or just in general that you remember that you executed in one of your films?
Yeah.
And the story behind it?
Yeah, well, I mean, she always talked about how on the first day of shooting, the leading actor will challenge you about something really stupid to test you. And I found that happens in every movie. And you have to win that fight, she said. And I remember on White Fang, I was shooting the first day of shooting. Seymour Cassell came up to me wearing a cowboy hat. I said, "Hey, Seymour, this is the Yukon in the winter. You can't be wearing a cowboy hat. You have to wear one that goes on your head." "Oh, I think this character would like this." "Seymour, no, you cannot wear that hat. You have to wear the other one because your ears would burn off if you wore that." And he kept fighting me, and I won. And then he was fine the rest of the shoot. But I recognized that Nina was right. That was the moment. And it happens on every movie.
Yeah, which, by the way, speaking of White Fang, that's another one of my favorite films that came out in the 90s. And I actually just saw it maybe last year, I think, during COVID with my kids. And they loved it too. It's such a timeless film.
Yeah.
I think around that time, there's another film that came out, Journey of Natty Gann. I don't know if you remember, by Disney.
Same wolf.
Yeah, same wolf. I was just going to say that. It was the same wolf.
And that was directed by Jeremy Kagan, who is a good friend of mine, teaches at USC, teaches directing. And he helped me a lot with figuring out how to work with animals, because you have to work with the trainer. You have to get a relationship with the trainer. It's very important, because if you don't, the leading actor, wolf, is an actor, and you have to make sure that he's happy.
So you mentioned working with the trainer. What was Was there any difference in dealing with an actor that you have worked in the previous films in White Fang compared to working with the trainer who was obviously working with the dog, and then you have the crew waiting, and it's a totally different thing. It's not like a human being, right? Like it's everybody's. Talk about that. Like, how different was that?
Well, you have to tell exactly what you need. Like, I mean, I worked with also Doug Seuss, who brought his bear, Bart the bear. He was also in that movie. And working with him, we had to make sure that the bear did not hurt the actor. There's one scene where Ethan is running away from the bear, and the bear's running after him, and I was terrified that the bear might catch up to him. But we had people all around in case that happened. And there's a scene where the bear is roaring at Ethan. He's hiding behind it.
Right.
And the roar was actually the bear had his mouth open and we were throwing popcorn in his mouth. We had this roar afterwards, but it looks horrible, but he was just eating popcorn. So there's little tricks that you have to do. And they have like spots, they train them to hit a mark. And they go from this mark to this mark with a clicker. And so when they go from one mark to the other, they get a treat. And so I would have to break out where I wanted them to move, and then they would work with them a bit, and then we would film. Because I wanted to use dolly shots with the animals, the way Jean-Jacques Annaud did in The Bear. I thought it was so fascinating to see the camera move with the animals as if they were actors. And I love that. And we did it in White Fang, and it has a kind of a wonderful storytelling feel because you feel like the filmmakers are in control of the story because the animals are hitting their marks.
I bet. And I think it was your first film filming in a winter condition, correct? White Fang?
Yeah. It was 40 degrees below zero and really, really cold. I got hepatitis from some fish, bad fish. We had to close down for a couple of days. It was brutal conditions, and being in the woods at night with 40 degrees below zero, surrounded by wolves, not fun.
Well, the film came out to be great.
Yeah, I was the way it came out, but it was a struggle to make it. And one scene, Seymour Cassell was running from the wolves, and the wolves were supposed to go from one cage to the other with the clickers. And we had to time it so Seymour would run, and then the wolves would be released, and then they would go into the other thing. And what happened was we were filming it from a distance, so it was a wide shot. He's running, and he tripped, and everybody went crazy because the wolves, when they see somebody down, that means that they're a prey. So all the trainers came running in to get to the wolves before they got to Seymour. So it was a dangerous shoot too.
Yeah. And one of the things I really loved about the film, aside from the visuals, I mean, it was the sort of the beginning of Ethan Hawke's career, and at least from what I remember reading at the credits on IMDb, I don't remember seeing it on the film one way or other. The music was composed by Basil Plor. I always have a hard time to pronounce it.
Basil Polidori. Yeah.
And then it also said Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer wasn't that big at the time in 1990. Early 19. How was he part of that composing?
Well,
or
the story behind that is that Basil and I went to film school together, and he had done my score for the Blue Lagoon, and he had done John Milius' score for Big Wednesday and Conan. So he was wonderful. He was a wonderful composer. But Disney had Hans Zimmer was their favorite composer. So I came in, I said, I want Basil. And they said, well, we're not sure about him. And I said, well, I really, really want him. So they let me get him. But then they decided, just as a backup, they would hire Hans Zimmer to do a backup score. And they spent a lot of money because they had to fly him to London during Christmas week and to write a score in 1 week. And he came back, and I said to Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the head of the studio at the time, so Jeffrey, to be fair, I want you to sit with me and watch every cue with both scores, and let's pick it out together. And so we did. He agreed, and we used mostly Basil's score, and I think there were two of Hans's. but mostly it was Basil. And so he was very fair. And so the movie has two clips, two scores. And a lot of times when I go to film schools, I often will show a sequence dry, and then with Hans score and Basil score, so people can see how different composers approach a sequence. It's very interesting.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I've always wondered the same thing about a script. What would happen if Spielberg took a script versus Scorsese, or anybody, like even a student, like what kind of films would come out? Because you're literally, as a storyteller, whether you're a composer or a writer or a director, you're literally telling the same story, but from the point of view of your own life experiences. And there will be some little intricate details that will go in there that will not. And I find that fascinating too, that how things are interpreted by people differently. I think it's pretty cool. There should be some sort of a study done on that regularly, of just a film or music, how it pans out with different people.
Well, watching it, I mean, there's no right or wrong. It was just different interpretations.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
And how I wanted to give the movie a flavor. I mean, Hans was doing sort of mood stuff, and Basil was doing theme stuff. So you've got this theme in your head that's the Wolf's theme, or this is Ethan's theme, and I kind of like that, because it just psychologically impacts you more than just adventure or scariness or stuff like that. But Hans only had like a week to do the whole score, so I think he probably would have done it a little differently if he had more time.
For sure. No, for sure. Both Basil and Hans, I mean, they're remarkable. I mean, Basil has done RoboCop, Conan the Barbarian, Free Willy. I mean, those are like some of the big names in the 80s and the 90s. And like I said, White Fang music was fascinating, but I was just kind of curious about the whole Hans Zimmer and him.
Story.
What's your plan with the book right now? Is it out? Are you doing book tours? Just run that by me.
It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I'm on this Sunday. I'm going to be doing a signing at the Academy Museum with Carl Weathers, who's one of the subjects of the book. He's agreed to come, and I'm going to show the drawing I did of him and talk about our relationship, because we met when I was directing Starsky and Hutch way back before Rocky, and so I was one of the first directors he worked with, and then we worked together over the years. We worked for USC's Institute for Creative Technology, which was sort of a think tank for future kind of technology, and then he was in my virtual reality series called Defrost, which you have to wear goggles to watch. So we've been working together for many years, and he started directing Mandalorian, and I got to go down on the set of that and see how he worked with these big giant TV screens. That was spectacular. So Carl's been a good friend, and he's showing up to help me with my book signing.
And have you sent out the books to all the directors that you have featured in the book?
No, I'm a little nervous because none of them knew I drew them. They might not like the drawing. I thought about that, but I thought, well, what if they hate it? What if they, or they're offended? I haven't heard from any of them yet, but I'm sure I will. And when I run into them, they'll either say, "Oh, thanks," or "How dare you?" I don't know.
I mean, if you were just doing sketches and nothing else, yeah, you're probably right. But I mean, there's a story to it too, right? I mean, that I think.
Well,
to me,
the stories are all how much I admire them. It's not I don't say anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when I saw the book, like I was going through it, but the first thing I wanted to see, because I'm a huge Spielberg fan, like what was a Spielberg story, and then I saw his sketch, and that maybe stayed with me for like 2 seconds, and I wanted to read the story, and I completely, like, that just immersed me in more. The sketch was great, but the story was more something that people will be in tune to, and obviously that's why, it's just a personal experience of yours with all these incredible individuals.
Or things that I admire about their movies too. I mean, it's kind of like I pick out things that I remember from their movies, like John Carpenter. I talk about the the deer coming to life in one of those movies, the sci-fi movie they did, the guy's stomach chopping off a guy's hands. I mean, these things are emblazoned in my memory. Sometimes I talk about that, things that when I think of them, I think of like Cameron Crowe, You Had Me at Hello,
Yeah.
God knows, what's the thing, famous line about I love the smell of napalm in the morning. I mean, all these things that trigger when you think of a certain director.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're absolutely right about that. I was going through like the year that Flight of the Navigator was made, and it was in the mid 80s, I think, right? 86.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is just me being maybe overthinking about it too much. One of the things that happened in the 80s, I mean, you talked about that, how there was a young audience after Easy Rider, like after 1969. And then in 80s, what came out was Amblin, right? With Spielberg's, all these
Right.
movies like Goonies, Gremlins, Harry and the Henderson. And it occurred to me when I was rewatching Flight of the Navigator, it Disney wasn't that big in the 80s as it used to be in the, up until like late 60s and maybe middle of 70s. And they kind of got a rebirth in the 90s. And it just kind of occurred to me, was Flight of the Navigator ever possibly planned out to go to Amblin, or was it like, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of, for me,
No,
it's like an Amblin film.
I get it. No, it was really two different studios were making that. Mark Damon's producer sales organization, which is an international distribution company for worldwide distribution, and Disney. And Disney was going to have it for America and producer sales for around the world. So Mark wanted to make it an action movie. He didn't care about family stuff, and Disney wanted to make it a family movie. So I was caught in the middle, and in the script meetings, we want I want the government to be shooting down the flying saucer. No, we want the family to be. And I was sitting there going, but luckily, the way that they pulled in two different directions worked out. Because the first part of the movie is kind of dark, and then it becomes a Disney movie later on. So it's unusual. I don't think if we started out with one company, it would have been like that.
Yeah, and it worked out because it like you said, I think sometimes the pull from two opposite directions, not all the time, sometimes can bring in the best, and because you're just trying to, balance the
Right.
seesaw, for the lack of a better word. And one film that I truly enjoyed by you was the sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. And what was that? I mean, I'll get to other films, but I mean, you've just done some incredible stuff. The stuff that I and a lot of people grew up with, taking a film from Joe Johnston, also a Disney film, and turning it into literally the opposite of what the original one was. It was a big task, and at the time, the special effects, I still remember watching it in theater. I did not even for a second thought that it looked fake or it looked too CGI or whatever the term is. How was your experience working on that wonderful film?
Well, I'll tell you, I did not want to do a sequel to another movie, and Jeff Katzenberg had another director on that movie, and he was clearly going to go way over budget because of the way he was talking. And so he said, "Come in and save this project for me. I need you to do this." I said, "I don't want to do a sequel." He said, "Come and look at this." So he took me into the screening room, and he showed me a test clip of this giant baby walking through Vegas with thousands of people running away. And I said, okay. I loved it. I thought it looked so cool, like taking the Godzilla thing and having a child. So that's what got me hooked. And he said, "Okay, I'll do it if you let me direct an adult movie afterwards." And he said, "Okay." Unfortunately, he left before he left and went.
That's right.
Never got to do that movie, but I did do Honey. And the thing that I loved doing that movie was the ability to try out forced perspective shoots. We did it on the same soundstage as Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which was one of my favorite movies for visual effects because it was all done in the camera, a lot of it, where they build two sizes of set. The camera lines up so it looks like the people are small books, do our big. And we did that,
Hmm.
built several sets that had that idea, and it worked great. The shots are flawless and look so real. The idea that the baby's giant. And I had so much fun doing that, just experimenting with visual effects. And I did a lot of blue screen. I had not done much of that. So it was like a learning experience.
Yeah, it was a fun movie, and funny you mentioned that about Katzenberg leaving. Obviously, we know he went to DreamWorks, start DreamWorks. Um, did you get any approach from anybody at DreamWorks, whether it was Katzenberg or Spielberg, to direct something at DreamWorks?
No, I didn't. I kind of went off on my own to do some small movies like Getting It Right, which was a movie I absolutely loved the book. And I arranged to get the rights, and I arranged to put up to get the money, and went to England and shot that with John Gielgud and Helen Bonham Carter and Lynn Redgrave. It was one of my favorite experiences. It's about a 31-year-old straight hairdresser who is very shy, and how he loses his virginity. It was a small little fun movie, but that's the type of thing I want to do.
It seems to me, I mean, going by your profile too, like your career sort of went in the more independent way, if that's not something I'm mistaken about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I after being in the studio system where they tell you how to do the movie, I wanted to do more things that I had control of, and I couldn't really get a lot of those movies off the ground because it's so hard, you know.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, so I turned down a lot of studio films that I just didn't want to go through that process again. And luckily, I was able to survive.
Do you have something in the works that you want to direct of your own, or would you like to direct another studio
I
film,
have
or is that?
I have a project, an independent project to shoot in Europe at the beginning of the year, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm very excited about it, and it's something that I can't really talk about now, but it's going to be really really special. I'm really looking forward to it. And I also have the documentary coming out called uh, called Baby Boomer Yearbook, and you can see a preview at babyboomeryearbook.com. It's about my high school class. It's kind of like following along Michael Apted's 7 Up. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he did a series where every 7 years he would film the same thing. And I did that with my high school class. And so it's sort of an American version of that. And we are now looking for the right place to launch it.
Fantastic. I'm just on the website right now, just going through it. And speaking of documentary, have you thought, I mean, I don't know how that would be. Um, is there a possible complementary addition to the book that you just written that can turn into some form of documentary down the road?
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but I do have volume 2 I'm working on with another 100 directors. There will definitely be a volume 2 drawing directors, and that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it, but I will now start thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that would be wicked. I mean, it's just to have
Flips.
those. Well, I mean, the way I look at it is, again, I'm not telling you what to do. You
I
know
love
better than
ideas.
I do. Just because I make documentaries myself, feature documentaries. I just think like having, even not even like as documentary per se, but more like one-on-one conversation with that director that you want to feature, and just maybe having, like an episode on 3 directors, or just because I think we're in that era right now where podcasts have become so huge and people love listening to conversations, and people enjoy that. Just again, just food for thought.
I'll eat that food.
Fantastic. Just one last question. Anything else you want to add to the book that you want to say to people, the
Oh,
audience?
it's for anyone who loves movies. It's a really good book. It's very easy to read. It's very fast, and it's a great gift because Christmas is coming. For any filmmakers, and I'd suggest that. But also, for any actors or filmmakers, the Nina Foch course for filmmakers and actors is a fantastic gift too. And these are not, I don't get a lot of money from this stuff. I really do believe in getting the word out to people who really care about this. That's what I'm pushing.
Right. No, I totally agree. I mean, going through the book, I like I said, the stories are fascinating, but even if those stories are, whether they're film related, direction related or not, there's just so much stuff you learn from people's personalities and people's conversation, and you can interpret in your own way. And I loved it. I absolutely loved reading those stories. And I think it's a perfect book for anybody who's in the entertainment industry, not anyone who's just a director or producer, because you can relate to those stories, even if you're a lighting technician or a spot boy or whatever that is.
Great. Well, thank you for the wonderful plug there, Howard. Appreciate
No,
it.
it's I'm being honest. I love reading film related stuff. Anything else is challenging, I'll be honest. But it was a very fun book to read. I truly enjoyed it, and it just brought back a lot of memories.
Great. Thank you so much.
Perfect. It was lovely talking to you, Randall. I hope to speak to you again. Maybe we can do something
Yeah.
down the road again.
Last time we talked, Pee Wee had just died, right?
Yes.
We got cut off? Yeah. That was sad. Wow. I'm going to his memorial this Sunday, I think, or next Sunday. I'm not sure. We're going to have all his friends come and talk about this. That's going to be wild. I hope it's funny. I hope it's nice and morose.
It's so bizarre. I was just talking to a friend the other day. I mean, it's part of life. You start seeing people that you've sort of grown up with, and naturally it's just, again, like, it's the way life works. Everybody has to go, and you start wondering about your own,
of course,
existence, right? Like, what's the purpose, and
where did they go? Where did they go?
Exactly.
Are they still on another planet?
Yeah. And where am I gonna go, right? All that stuff. So it's sad, but he was a great entertainer, one of the greatest entertainers in my view after Charlie Chaplin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he'll be missed. Well, thank you, Randall. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment, and do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.